Welcome to the Lunch and Learn video series brought to you by the Gateway Down Syndrome Association. Today we will learn more about ABLE accounts with our guest Valerie Baker from Planify Group. Valerie, an LPL Financial Planner, will present how your loved one with Down syndrome can save and invest money without losing eligibility for government programs.
I'm grateful to have the opportunity to visit about this topic. I think that ABLE accounts are very misunderstood in our community, and I think that they're a great planning tool for families who have kiddos with special needs. I am the mother of an adult child with Down syndrome. His name is Derek. He is almost 29 years old, which is shocking and amazing. I also have two daughters, Jenna and Katie. So sometimes Derek is the rose between the thorns, and sometimes he's the thorn between the roses. And all of you who have children with Down syndrome understand that. So wanted to discuss ABLE accounts today. Obviously, we have to have disclosures because all the attorneys need to be paid. So here's the overall agenda, what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you an overview of what ABLE is and what it's not. My son Derek does have a paid employment position, and we do have an ABLE account for him. So I do use the ABLE account as a planning tool in the overall financial plan that we have for our family. So here's the overall agenda. We're going to talk about eligibility, who can open an ABLE, account limits, qualified disability expenses, funding options. We're going to talk about the ABLE payback. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the next screen. What happens if medical improvement changes the beneficiary's disability? I don't think that's necessarily relevant to our group. And then we'll also talk a little bit about special needs trusts and how they differ from ABLE accounts. So ABLE was actually signed into law back in 2014 by President Obama, and it stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. It's the first opportunity that we've had as families who have loved ones with special needs to have a savings plan available to us for the individual with a disability for their own money that does not negatively impact SSI and Medicaid. So it is a great win for families who have children or loved ones with Down syndrome and other disabilities. The ABLE account was basically just kind of put on top of a 529 plan. Which made it easier for all of the financial institutions out there to support these ABLE accounts. A 529 is a plan that often families save for college funding for with their children or themselves. Basically, the ABLE is what we call a 529A from a legal perspective. Prior to January 1st of this year, the disability would have had to have occurred prior to age 26. Now, for our community, kids with Down syndrome, that's kind of irrelevant, right? But it has changed effective this year to the age of 46. And then most states do allow you out-of-state residents to use their plan. I did do a lot of research. I opened Derek's ABLE, I don't know, I'm going to guess 2019, 2018, somewhere in that time frame. And I did elect to use the Missouri ABLE plan. I think it's a competitive plan from a cost perspective and investment structure perspective. But you can use any ABLE account, any state's plan when opening an ABLE. And anybody can contribute to an ABLE for an individual. And I'm going to talk more about that later. So again, the age requirements are somebody whose disability had occurred prior to the age of 46. And if you are already approved in receiving SSI, or if you receive SSDI, you are automatically approved to or eligible to open an ABLE. If you are not on SSI or SSDI, then you must meet the Social Security definition of a disability and provide some sort of a letter from a doctor stating that the beneficiary of the ABLE account is disabled and therefore qualifies to open the account. This is a big one, and this is something everybody needs to be aware of. Each person with a disability can only have one ABLE account. So if there is a situation where mom and dad are not together, they both can't open their own ABLE accounts for the child with a disability. This is a plan where everybody's going to have to work together, whether it's, mom and dad, or if grandma and grandpa want to put money in there, or siblings or whomever. Only one ABLE account per person with a disability. The person with a disability is eligible to open the ABLE account themselves. Now, in my particular case for my son, I opened it for him. And I think oftentimes for people with Down syndrome, it would be somebody else opening the ABLE account on that person's behalf. You can open these accounts in this order. The power of attorney for the person, the conservator of legal or legal guardian, spouse, parent, sibling, grandparent, or the rep payee from SSI. ABLEs have limits as far as how much you are able to contribute on an annual basis. This particular slide deck was formed last year. In last year, the max was 19,000. The max for 2026 is actually 20,000. So you could put in up to 20,000 into an ABLE account for a person with a disability. And again, remember that that's from all contributors, and each person with a disability can only have one ABLE. Additionally, if the person with a disability works, you have the opportunity through Able to Work to add an additional, now this shows $15,060 in 2025. It's actually $15,650 of the disabled person's earnings into the ABLE. So you could put in 20 plus the 15,650 from the disabled person's earnings if you so elected to in 2026. States do have a total allowable amount in an ABLE. They show the range of 235 to almost 600,000. The max that Missouri allows is 550,000. However, this bottom right quadrant is a big deal. If the ABLE beneficiary is receiving SSI, SSI will not allow the account to be more than $100,000. Okay. And honestly, for the way that I use my ABLE for Derek and the way that I recommend my clients use their ABLEs for their children or loved ones with Down syndrome, I would never be looking to put, $500,000 into an ABLE. So I think the $100,000 limit is certainly more than reasonable for the reasons in which we use this. ABLE accounts can be used to pay for qualified disability expenses. They call them QDEs. These are expenses that are related to the disability of the individual. If you use the ABLE funds for non-qualified distributions, you could have to pay income tax and potentially a penalty. Now, what is a qualified disability expense? To be very clear and honest with you, that is a very gray area. It's so open and so not specific that it's kind of hard to answer. But all of these things, health, prevention and wellness, education, assistive technology, employment training and support, housing and basic living expenses, transportation, legal fees, financial management and administrative services, funeral and burial expenses. All of these things are tagged as qualified disability expenses. But the reality of the situation is that ABLE accounts have been around for such a short period of time that there hasn't been a lot of legal case, I don't want to say case studies, case management. They haven't, nobody's taken a case to court to create an outline for what we can and cannot use our ABLE accounts for. So typically, the way that these types of IRS regulations are more honed in and defined is when somebody does something and the IRS says, you can't do that. And the person says, I think I can. And then there's a court case where it's gone in front of a judge and it's determined either A, you shouldn't have done that, or B, yeah, it's legal. And those court cases, those ongoing court cases, kind of give you a trail with which you can choose to, um, you know, make your own decisions for your own personal situation. Unfortunately, there just hasn't been a lot of that out that for ABLEs yet. So anything that is related to the disability that's within one of these categories, I would say if you feel comfortable making that argument, then you can use your ABLE account for that. I would also say, and I would implore people, and this was no different than the 529s that I used for my two daughters when they were both in college, is that you should keep very copious notes on all of your expenditures. So if you take money out of an ABLE account, for instance, so let me look at it from my son's perspective. He is involved with Special Olympics. He, in the past, has done softball and basketball. That timing's been a little off, but he does powerlifting and swimming. If I was to purchase for him a pair of swimming goggles that are prescription because he wears glasses, that's related to his disability. That is for his health and wellness, right? So that is something that I would feel comfortable in using his ABLE account for. During the off season in powerlifting, I pay for additional training for him because he kind of really took to the powerlifting thing and is doing pretty well and really enjoys it. So, that payment that I'm making for his training, off-season training for his powerlifting, I could take from his qualified disability expenses. Now, would I feel comfortable? There's transportation down here. Would I feel comfortable saying I'm going to buy me a new car from his ABLE because I drive him around? That might be a stretch. I don't know that that would stand up in court, but maybe I can charge him, Uber rates to transport him to and from work and to and from his workouts and those sorts of things. So I think there's got to be a reasonableness test there, and unfortunately, it's so broad that until there's more, legal action as to what things have happened, I don't think we're going to have as much of a roadmap as maybe some people would feel comfortable with. Funding options. Funds can come from anywhere. A benefit from the beneficiary themselves if they work, or if somebody gives them money. This is one thing that I think ABLE is a huge win for us, for families of people who have disabilities. So if Great Aunt Tessie gives Derek, $15,000 in her will because she loves him and thinks he's funny, which he is, I could very quickly take that 15,000 that he's just inherited and pop that over into his ABLE account, and it wouldn't be an issue. It would not disqualify him for SSI and Medicaid. It's within the annual allowable deposits into an ABLE account. Now, if Great Aunt Tessie gave him $150,000, I got a problem, right? And then we're talking about a first party special needs trust, which is more expensive to set up and would have to happen very quickly. The second thing
Valerie,
you can put into an ABLE account is earnings, right? So when Derek was working more, he does work, he is paid, but his income is lower now than it was pre-COVID. He worked at a restaurant 4 days a week at the time. Um, he would often come up on that, $1,000, $2,000 amount in his checking account, and I would get nervous. And so when that would happen, I would shift some of his money from his checking account into his ABLE. So, money that they have earned. You can move 529. So if somebody had opened a 529 for their child and then realized maybe they weren't going to go to college or after all, they had no qualified education expenses to spend it, the 529 from, you can move, 529 funds into Enable, but you can only move them in the annual allowable amounts. So this says again 19,025, but now it's 20. So if you had $40,000 in your kids' 529, decided they're not going to do higher education, then 2 years, you can move 20 grand in the 2 years to get it to the ABLE. You could also do that if you had money left over in somebody's 529, another child. You could change the beneficiary and move it if you so elected to. You can
Valerie, we did,
also move money from a special needs trust into Enable. And I think the one time that this makes the most sense to do is if you recall the last when we were talking about the qualified disability expenses, one of the things that Enable can pay for is housing. So if you were to move money from a special needs trust, say a third party special needs trust that you set up for your child, and move that money from the third party special needs trust to the ABLE and then assist in paying rent for that child, that is not considered, that money coming out of the ABLE is not considered in-kind support. So their SSI is not impacted. If you pay somebody's rent out of a special needs trust, that has to be reported as income and their SSI is impacted. So this is a big win for families as well, having the flexibility to move money from a special needs trust to Enable. Does that make sense?
Valerie, we did have a question come up
Uh-huh.
in the chat. It says, can we take the money from our son's SSI and put it in the ABLE account?
I don't know why not. If it goes into his checking account and if you're charging rent or whatever, and you put that, you take out your rent piece, he has money left over and it's tipping up on the mark where you're getting concerned, which for SSI is $2,000, then yeah, you can move that into Enable.
So going back to this last thing about the special needs trust, but so that would still be, you would still have those same limits on the amount that you could move from a special needs trust into their ABLE account in terms of the yearly
Yes.
limits. Okay.
Yes. So if you were, say, assisting with rent payments, then you can move 20 grand in to assist with rent payments in 2025. And as you can see, it kind of goes up every year, right? So that number's a little bit higher every year, but it's not significantly higher every year. This is the biggie. This is the thing that everybody needs to know is when the beneficiary passes away. So in my case, when Derek passes away, Medicaid is the first beneficiary on his ABLE. There is a Medicaid recovery. Now it is funds paid since the account was opened. So it's not going to go back to when Derek was 1 year old, right? It's going to go back to when the ABLE was opened, which again, I think was around 2018 or 2019. And any costs that they've covered for him within that time frame between, say, let's just call it 2019 and when he passes away, Medicaid can make a claim against the outs or the remaining value in the ABLE account. Okay. This is why, in my opinion, an ABLE account does not replace mom and dad setting up a third party special needs trust for their child with a disability, right? My third party special needs trust says when Derek passes away, the money remaining in his special needs trust goes to his two sisters. Whereas this ABLE account, any money that's left in this ABLE account when Derek passes away is going to potentially go back to the state of Missouri. Now, the good thing is they give you a little bit of latitude. You could pay for burial before Medicaid payback, and that kind of thing. But nonetheless, the first beneficiary when the person with a disability passes away is going to be Missouri Medicaid. Okay. This doesn't make ABLE bad. This just, in my opinion, says only put Derek's money in his ABLE, not my money. My money's not going into Derek's ABLE. My money will never go into Derek's ABLE. The only thing that goes into Derek's ABLE is money that he made. And so Medicaid kind of has a reasonable, claim to money that Derek made. But money, Medicaid doesn't have a reasonable claim to money that I made. And that's why my money goes into a special needs trust. His money, I'm okay going into an ABLE. Opening an ABLE account. You can go, as I said, to any state's ABLE account. I think Missouri actually really just piggybacked on the Ohio plan. I did, as I said, do some research when I opened his account. I can't imagine it's significantly different now. The Missouri plan's a good plan. There is an annual fee. I think it's about $35 that you're paying annually to have the account open. There are internal expenses to the investment funds that you select within the program, and that is normal. That's the same in a 529. It's probably the same in your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs. If you've got money in a mutual fund and it's invested, there are internal expenses there. So I don't see that as being a problem. I think that's pretty typical. It was a very simple process to go on to the Missouri ABLE and log in all the information and open the account. There are, minimum amounts that you need to start the accounts with. I don't have that handy. I don't know exactly what that is. Take a look at that depending upon how much you're trying to move in there. Some accounts have debit cards. I've not gone there with Derek. He does have a debit card to his checking account. But I don't want him accessing his ABLE, when he's at the vending machine at work today, which is where he is right now. And he always, even though we talk about it, we still see vending charges, right? I don't want that hitting his ABLE. So, I will say in the state of Missouri that, you can take a tax deduction but by putting money in an ABLE. Again, I'm not going to put my money in an ABLE, but if you have a child who is making a reasonable wage and is filing tax returns on an annual basis, keep in mind that any monies that they put in their ABLE account, you can deduct from your Missouri state tax returns. That is also, by the way, the same for 529 plans. So if you're putting money in a 529, for a child, make sure you're getting your Missouri state tax deduction on that. Another planning tool might be a special needs trust. So I'm not gonna, belabor this because this is not a special needs planning presentation. It's an ABLE presentation. But very quickly, I think now I'm sure legally these are not the same, but the first party and self-settled are kind of the same in my mind. These are monies that your child, say with Down syndrome, receives, whether it be great aunt Tessie who leaves them some sort of an inheritance, or maybe they're in some sort of an accident and there's a lawsuit, they were injured and they get, some sort of a settlement for that. So the first party and self-settled trusts are trusts that are settled or funded with the person's with a disability with their own money. Okay. And these trusts, both first party and self-settled, are also going to have a payback to Medicaid. Okay. A third party special needs trust is the kind of trust that I set up for Derek, right? So my husband and I have a trust, the Baker Family Trust. And then we also have the Derek Baker Special Needs Trust. We have a life insurance policy that's going to pay into that special needs trust when my husband and I both pass away, called a second to die life insurance policy. Little less expensive than getting two separate policies on each of us. But it's a third-party trust. A third party establishes it, a third party funds it, and the third party decides where the money goes when the person with a disability passes away. So again, in our case, our two daughters are the contingent beneficiaries when Derek is no longer here to receive benefit from the third-party trust we've set up. And then you have a pooled trust. And a pooled trust, the biggest one I'm aware of, and especially in this area, is the Midwest Special Needs Trust. They are a nonprofit organization that runs a special needs trust. It's a great tool for perhaps a smaller legacy that's being left for a person with a disability, because they'll do all the management of the trust. There are fees associated with it. Depending upon how much money is left, sometimes the pooled trust retains it, sometimes it's paid out to other beneficiaries when that person with a disability passes away. But those are things you'd have to really kind of dive into. So here's a nice comparison, right, between an ABLE and a special needs trust. So again, this number is now 20 in 2026. But you are limited in your ABLE that you can only put in 20,000. So if great aunt Tessie leaves Derek 25, and by the way, I don't have a great aunt Tessie, but if I did and she left $25,000 to Derek, I could only put 20 into his ABLE. Okay. Whereas a special needs trust has no limit how much you can put in. This is that whole shelter payments without SSI reduction that I talked about. If you are needing to assist your loved one with a disability with their rental payment, for instance, you can run that through your ABLE up to the annual contribution limit, and it does not have a negative impact on SSI. However, if you take that money directly out of a special needs trust, then SSI is unhappy with that. The third line, taxable income, that's that whole thing, right? If I'm taking money out of the ABLE to pay rent, it's not considered taxable income coming from the ABLE, but it is taxable income coming from the SNT. Your beneficiary eligibility requirements, it's changed to 46 now for ABLE. For an SNT, it's 65. For a Medicaid payback, again, ABLE, yes, has a Medicaid payback, as do the first and the first party trust, not the third party here it's on the other side. So the SNT does not have a payback for a third party special needs trust, but does for a first. And then the ABLE account has that limit of $100,000 for SSI, and SNT, there is no limit that impacts your SSI qualification. So I think the best ways, I had a friend, and I know we got about 10 more minutes before we wanted to open for questions, but just to kind of talk about the ways that I see an ABLE account being used to our advantage as families who have loved ones with disabilities. I had a friend whose daughter lived in now I can't even think of the organization out in St. Charles. Anyway, she lived in a home in St. Charles. She was paying rent, but she was also working, and she kept running up on that, $2,000 thing. Well, the next thing you know, my friend is buying a deep freeze for the house. Then she's buying a new vacuum for the house. And then she's buying a, generator for the house because her daughter kept running up on those limits on how much she could have in her checking account. There was nowhere to go with the money. And ABLE is perfect in that situation. That's where you go with the money. I also have had a client in the past who had a child with a disability who really needed a service animal. It was a seizure dog. This child had seizures. They really wanted a service animal for this child. The child was under 18 and it was already on Medicaid. It was a very medically involved situation. Mom and dad, right, and when the child is less than 18, when their assets are viewed upon for qualifications for Medicaid, Mom and dad couldn't save what they needed to save to get the service animal for their child because they would have too much assets and they would lose Medicaid. So an ABLE account is a perfect situation in that case to save for that service dog. And then the inheritance thing, right? If it's a small inheritance, that's the easiest way to do that because once that inheritance is given to your child in their name, it is legally not acceptable to just take it and put it in your name. The cleaner, most legal way to do that is to put it in an ABLE account, or if it's too much, a first party special needs trust. So those are the ways that I see the ABLE as being a big win for our families. It's a great tool, but again, I don't put my own money in it. I only put Derek's money in it. I previously worked with Mass Mutual. I'm now with LPL Financial, but I am a broker with Mass Mutual and still part of their special care team. But the point of this is to say you should really be working with financial advisors who understand special needs planning because it is not the same as regular financial planning for families who don't have kids with special needs.